The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming to you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm Michael Bishop, and I'm coming to you live in Nashville at the Maxwell Millennium Hotel. Had some family stuff to take care of today, so we're on the road, and you see as right behind me is the beautiful skyline of Nashville. Got a lot to talk about tonight, a lot of Super Bowl stuff, especially what's going to happen next year, especially with the Rams going forward, and can the Bengals continue on the path that they're going? Can they improve the offensive line? But first, let's get our special guest in for the night. Joining us tonight is the most famous and most infamous Lucas PANZICA. And Lucas, thank you for joining us on the show tonight.
I appreciate it, man. That's a unique introduction for me. I don't think I've ever been called either of those things. But you know what? I'll take them both. Put them in my back pocket. Appreciate it.
That's how we do it in the Power Hour, just setting you big for success, especially down the road and current success.
Sounds good.
And you'll have to apologize. My daughters are here, so you'll probably hear them in and out of the show. So
all good. Let's make them a part of it.
There you go. We'll have a little live audience. So we're going to have some tough critics, but we'll try and work through it. So, Lucas, the Super Bowl, really, once again, it's going to have huge numbers once they come out officially. How'd you feel about this one this year? Did you feel it lived up to the expectations, or did it fall a little flat?
No, I thought, start to finish, it's about everything you could ask for, right? You had lead changes. You had a 17-point unanswered comeback by the Bengals, and then vice versa, the Rams kind of flipping it on them at the end. You had the best players stepping up in the biggest moments, at least as it pertains to Los Angeles, where, the MVP debate was between two of the best players in football, and Aaron Donald and Cooper Kupp. So I don't think you could ask for much better, really. I don't know if people went in expecting a 50-something point shootout, 44-42 type of game. You don't really get those very often in Super Bowls. So I walked away pretty happy with what we had seen, pretty entertained by it.
And we definitely had a lot of storylines going into the game, especially once Aaron Donald once put out that it's possible that this might have been his last game. And going forward, the Rams are going to be missing a huge piece there if he does officially decide to retire. So does it look like Donald might hang up his cleats and just ride off into the sunset on this one?
Yeah, that really gave us a nice twist there before kickoff with Rodney Harrison sort of dropping that bomb in pregame. I don't know if he will. Certainly, you could think of worse ways to ride off into the sunset. You hear so often players, one that I work with in Ramon Foster, they talk about it all the time, of just being able to go out on your own terms. And I don't know that you can go out on your own terms much more than an all-pro season, the 7th of his career, which is just an astounding number, a Super Bowl championship, the second for the franchise that you've played for, that you were drafted by. And at 30 years old, to go out healthy, to go out on top, certainly it would be unprecedented, I think, for a player at the level of Aaron Donald. I mean, he's the best defensive player in football. I don't think there's any question the resume he's put together over the last decade. So certainly I think it caught a lot of people off guard before the game, but we'll see. We'll see. I don't know what kind of conversations he'll have with Sean McVay, which, there are even reports about McVay thinking about taking a step back if the Rams were able to get it done before the game even started. So there's a lot swirling around this franchise here. It's going to be really interesting to see what that team looks like at the start of the 2022 season versus what we saw last night.
And funny bringing up McVay, it also looked like 2 years ago from a report that he was looking at potentially being on one of the ESPN jobs, possibly Monday Night Football. So I don't see him really the kind of guy that likes sitting and talking in the booth. So that's just me.
Yeah, I don't know that. I don't know. Can't speak to whether or not he would enjoy it or not, but I think he'd be fantastic at it. Sean McVay is the type of guy. I don't know if you've ever seen, some of the videos from Rams training camp a couple of years back of people would ask him, a certain play from 4 or 5 years ago when he was on staff in Washington. Say, okay, Vikings game, October 13th, second quarter, it's 3rd and goal on the 8-yard line, and you're losing 13-10. And he would say, oh, right, wheel route, Jamison Crowder, touchdown. He's that type of guy with that sort of amazing recall. There's certainly got to be one of the things that set him apart at 36 years old, to have already coached in 2 Super Bowls and won one is just an insane stat. So I think he would kill it. I think he would crush it on television, and then, maybe step back out of it and then probably be the most in-demand coach on the market if you wanted to do so. So that would be interesting. As much as we talk about players going out on their own terms, we don't have that conversation with coaches. Now, 36 is an extraordinarily young age to go out on your own terms as a head coach, but it's a new era we're living in, man. I don't know. I'd be fascinated. I'd be fascinated if Sean McVay decided to kind of rock the football world and go that route after already putting together one of the best young resumes in NFL history, if not the best.
And definitely speaking of resumes on television, it seems apparently Al Michaels has called his last game on NBC, possibly going over to Amazon, which would be a very, very successful hire for them. Who do you think would pair well with him if he does move on in that direction?
Oh, man. Who would pair well with Al Michaels? That's a great question. I'm a huge Al Michaels fan. I read his book a couple of years ago. The guy's called every major event there is to call, an absolute legend. And just kind of the ease that he broadcasts with, I think is his best trait. The way he just kind of puts you at ease, no matter how big the setting is, right? He doesn't need to elevate his voice in any particular moments. You just know that it's a big moment, a big game when Al Michaels is calling the game. He doesn't need to holler or anything when there's a big play. So I think that's what's special about Al Michaels too, in that he can work with almost anybody. I mean, when you go down the laundry list of some of his colored commentators that he's had, certainly just in recent years, obviously Chris Collinsworth, they've kind of put together one of the best duos in sports broadcasting. And then all those years he had with John Madden, I believe they did Monday Night Football together. I was probably a little bit young to be totally conscious of the sports media world at the time, but just knowing some background on Al Michaels, having read his book and being a fan of his and his broadcast style, I think he would fit in with almost anybody. Now, an Al Michaels, Sean McVay partnership on those Amazon games, now that would be something. That would be certainly interesting for two guys that far apart in age. But no, that's a great question, actually, because I don't know who's really on the docket as far as analysts go to work for that Amazon deal on Thursday Night Football. But I'm confident in saying that no matter who they paired with Al Michaels, he'd find a way to keep that style, that rhythm that makes him one of the best in the business, and to make that person he's working with look good too, and feel just as at ease as the audience.
And it'll definitely be interesting to see as they go forward trying to fill that slot.
Yeah.
But getting to the Super Bowl commercials, really, I feel this year it kind of fell a little flat. You had some good ones, but nothing really memorable. You know, it's different every year. You feel like the money that they spend, they know they've got to try and hit on some of these. Some companies do and some companies don't, but it kind of really felt relatively flat this year. I mean, what would be your take, Lucas, on this year's crop of commercials?
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't come away feeling like I got a good laugh out of the E-Trade babies. I don't know what it is about the talking babies that maybe I'm just immature. I thought that was funny. My favorite one was the Sopranos commercial by far. Huge fan of that show. I've watched it religiously. So seeing Meadow, drive through New Jersey with the music playing and all the same camera shots in that famous open of every Sopranos episode. That one definitely was the one that was the one commercial where I feel like there's one every year where there's a couple of voices like, hey, everyone be quiet in the room at whatever Super Bowl party you're at. That was it for me. There were certainly a few people that wanted to hush the room to see what we were going to get out of that commercial. I don't know if you ever watched that show, but maybe you're right. Maybe there's not the one that kind of sent the whole room in an uproar of laughter. I think there were a lot of decent ones. But yeah, maybe it wasn't as strong of a year. I think they just really tried the nostalgia factor for a lot of people with the Sopranos show, kind of like they did with the halftime show this year.
And before I even get to the halftime show, I'd say the one commercial that really stood out to me this year was the NFL's Claymation commercial with all the players they made. I really felt like that one. The NFL continues to put out commercials, kind of just selling their wares. This one just hit for me.
Yeah, no, that's a great example. I mean, at least for Titans fans, you've got Derrick Henry stiff-arming Deion Sanders into oblivion. I know people enjoyed that. And then to cap it off, though, with Walter Payton, right, running with the football, I know that definitely struck a chord with some people I work with that he was one of the big icons of their childhood. So, yeah, no, they know what they're doing in that sense. I thought that was really well done. That's a good one.
But get back to the halftime show that you brought up earlier. I find it hilarious, especially that you have Gen Xers and millennials right now battling over who holds the rights to these artists. And it's just been hilarious to me just reading the back and forth. So I know it's a hard discussion, and especially for you to probably pick a side. And I don't want to ask you to pick a side, but if you had to, who would you side with? just
So,
between the two of us.
as far as generations and who that music sort of belongs to, almost. Well, if that's the discussion, then I guess, oh man, that's tough, man. I guess I think about when music kind of has its biggest impact on people, and for me, that's probably those high school, college years, right? That's when you really have those formative years where you can kind of where a song plays that was that you were playing when you were 18, 19, 20 years old and really strikes a chord. So I think if you're in that range, then if you're going to have that discussion, I'd probably go to those type of people. And I'm 26. I guess when those songs came out in the early 2000s, I was rocking in second, third grade. So I'm not going to act like I was listening to 50 Cent when I was 8, 9 years old. But hey, I appreciated it. I thought it was really cool. I loved the West Coast vibes and the shout out to Tupac playing California Love. I thought Dr. Dre, just the way everything was orchestrated, was so well done. The thing with the halftime show like that is, though, if I had to pick one negative, with so many different artists, because you got Mary J. Blige and Kendrick and Eminem and Dr. Dre and Snoop and 50 Cent kind of comes out of nowhere. You can only get so many songs, right? You can only get like maybe one song per artist. And I know Dre and Snoop basically did 2 of their songs together. So I think if I had to pick one negative, it's just got a tiny little bit from each one of these great artists. But otherwise, it was really well done. But as far as who gets the music, I'll go with whoever it created the most nostalgia for. And I think the people that grew up with that music in their high school and college years, I think I'd hand it to those people. They probably got the most enjoyment out of that than anybody.
So Lucas isn't going to give us a full answer, but he's going to say, if you enjoyed it, you enjoyed it. But I can respect that.
Well, I don't know. I'm not very good at math. So what's the cutoff there if you were growing up in that era of Dr. Dre and coming out after NWA and his partnership with Snoop Dogg?
I think
what generation would that be?
I think it would come basically to a situation of where you were born in that era. For some people, it's the NWA era. Some people, it's Death Row. Some people, It was, right when Aftermath began. So I kind of fall like right in between, maybe 94, 95, because I'm 37. So, I kind of claim it all because technically they fell in my era. And I mean, I listened to a lot of that stuff, especially growing up. So, it was my cup of tea.
Yeah,
so
fair enough. There you go.
I'm more than happy to claim that.
All right, there you go. I think I made the millennial cutoff barely. I was born in 95, so it's right there. So I think there's probably a share of the millennials that feel like they have a claim to that as well.
But then again, I think like if you've been born in 85, I think technically you're a Zennial. So you're part Gen X, you're part millennial.
Okay. I might need to read up on this stuff then. I might need to read up on it and see if I can come back with a better answer.
There's a lot to get into that, but we won't try it here. But we definitely got a lot more Super Bowl things to talk about. But one thing I wanted to bring up before we went to break, I really appreciate that the officials let them play this year. But you did have a few ticky-tack calls, and especially the one call with T. Higgins that really just blew my mind. But I guess if you had to have controversy in the California Super Bowl, this had to be the Super Bowl to do it. So what was your takeaway from the officiating? Do you think it's something that needs to continue to be improved on, or do you think that it may be possible that booth reviews need to be tested a little more, especially in these situations?
Yeah, I think something like this game, with this game, it wasn't really a huge talking point, which is a good thing, probably until you had kind of a blip in the radar with T. Higgins kind of grabbing a hold of Ramsey's face mask, and obviously an offensive pass interference that was missed, and a huge play too, and that was on that early third quarter touchdown. But otherwise, it didn't really come up until the Logan Wilson holding call on third down near the goal line, near the end of the game on that game-winning drive by the Rams. And that one I didn't feel good about because you really had let those type of things go all game long. Logan Wilson also was having just a stellar performance, probably the best, had the best game of any Bengals defensive player. And it's really one of those ticky-tack, fouls that you don't call in the biggest moment of the biggest game of the season in American sports. So that part of it kind of bothered me. But, if you want to consider it a makeup call, then we'll call it a makeup call. But otherwise, I do think officiating was too much part of the conversation throughout the course of the season, both in college football and the NFL. And we always kind of do this, but I don't know. maybe I'm wrong. It felt like it was more so this year than most years because there were so many hot button topics in college football, whether it's players faking injuries to slow down up-tempo offenses, as you see that kind of play style start to take over in college football. And in the NFL, really a lot of times just kind of blatant stuff that just should never happen in a professional football game that I wish I knew what the solution was. I do think a play like that T. Higgins, Jalen Ramsey, no call. I think, why isn't that something that could just be reviewed and they say, oh, he did grab his face mask. That's offensive pass interference. Bring it back. And I know we've already tried that with the pass interference reviews, and they made it a rule. You could review it, you could challenge it, and then they never overturned it. They just said, okay, you can challenge it, but we're never going to overturn it. So I wish I had a better answer. Now, Mike Vrabel now on the committee there with the NFL. It'll be his first year on it as Sean Payton makes his way out. Mike Vrabel makes his way in. I'm sure he'll have something to say and he'll have some ideas, but it did feel like a little too much of a talking point throughout the course of the season. And that's certainly never a positive thing when it comes to officiating.
It'll definitely be interesting going forward to see what the committee will do. Definitely going to be a lot to talk about, especially the overtime rule, which has been mentioned. And before we get to break, I wanted to try and bring that up real quick. Potentially getting an opportunity next year to discuss this and put this on the table where both teams would actually have a chance to have a possession in the overtime period. Are you for this, or do you think this is something that just doesn't need to be?
I was always of the mind that, it was okay how it was, because I understand you're not giving the other quarterback an opportunity to win if that team that wins the toss gets the ball and goes down and scores. But you are giving that defense every opportunity to win. You know what I mean? I mean, just forcing a stop, a punt, a turnover, that can win you the game as much as scoring on that first drive can. But in this new era of football, I totally see the argument. And I think maybe I was kind of turned by that Bills-Chiefs game that we saw in the divisional round. And with that said, that was kind of felt like a once-in-a-lifetime game. I don't know that anybody alive has seen a playoff matchup like that with 25 points in the last 2+ minutes. The amount of lead changes there at the end. Truly one of the best playoff games we've ever seen. In a game like that, man, it really hurt not to see the Bills and Josh Allen get one more crack at it. So I do think the way the game is trending and the way these offenses are just becoming more and more high-powered, I guess at some point there's only so much a defense can do. So I think I'm with you there that it's fair enough that both offenses should get a crack at it. But will it happen? There's been a lot of pressure, I think, more so than ever this offseason. After that Chiefs-Bills game, I think if there's ever going to be kind of a turning point to get something changed in that aspect, I think it would be that game we saw in Kansas City between Chiefs and Bills.
And I'm definitely for just giving it a trial run. I mean, if we try it at least a few times in the regular season, I don't see any harm in it.
Sure.
I mean, worst case scenario, that just eliminates the tie, which if you're a Detroit fan, I know you don't want the tie.
Right.
So
that's right. Well, hey, the tie got the Pittsburgh Steelers into the postseason this year. If they lose that game against Detroit, they're out of it. So maybe they're not objecting as much. But yeah, I am surprised that we're sitting here in 2022. And listen, I say this as a soccer fanatic, right? That is my first love. I am surprised that we're sitting here in 2022 and ties are still a thing in professional football. But on the other hand, I'm also of the mind that, hey, sometimes nobody deserves to win the game, and that's okay. And I don't see it as a participation trophy kind of thing. I see it as the opposite of that. If you tied, it's not that you both won. It's that nobody won. Maybe nobody deserved to win sometimes.
Well, just Detroit, I'll side with you on this one. You deserve to win. That's all you're getting from me.
That's right. Yeah, they had a rough go of it this season. I don't know how much consolation they're taking out of Matthew Stafford taking a Super Bowl. I saw some shirts being printed up there. Some Detroit Rams fans trying to put two and two together, but and more power to them. They've had a tough couple of decades.
I mean, if you have to live vicariously through another team to get a championship, I mean, you do what you got to do.
Yeah, who am I to judge?
It's the life of a Detroiter. I understand. So, all right, guys, we'll take a quick 30-second break, and when we come back, we're going to break down one of my biggest disappointments this season, and it has nothing to do with the playoffs. So I'm Michael Bishop with the Power, and we'll be back in 30. The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. We are live here at the Maxwell Millennial in Nashville. Joining me tonight is Lucas PANZICA. Lucas, thank you for joining us on the show tonight. It's great to get your perspective on all these stories and everything, and my daughter has a lot apparently on her mind, so just got to let her get it off her chest.
Absolutely. Hey, we'll have her on the show sometime and see what she has to, who she's mocking to the Titans at 26 here in a couple of months.
I think she's got a few ideas, but right now she's having dinner, so I'll let her finish that up. She's got enough on her plate.
Fair enough.
All right, I just wanted Lucas to get a chance to shout out and let everybody know where to find him on all his social media platforms. So, Lucas, go ahead and let the audience know.
Sure. I'm at Lucas PANZICA on Twitter. You can hear me on 104.5 The Zone every day from 10 to 3. I produce the Buck Rising Show from 10 to 1, and then Blaine and Mickey from 1 to 3, and various Zone podcasts like the UT podcast and pretty much all of our high school football and basketball coverage that I co-host on The Zone.
Check the man out. He knows his stuff. One of the best in Nashville. You have no doubt you heard it here first. And guys, I'll throw a little shout out too. Make sure you follow and like and subscribe on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and TikTok at the Power Hour 615. Love the show. Help it grow. That's what we do. That's how we do it, because of you. Let's get to some of these comments real quick before we get to our next segment real quick. Elizabeth Bishop saying hello. Hello, Mom. Nice seeing you. Always good seeing you on the show. She's a big fan. Our buddy Lewis Chesney saying hello. Giving a shout out to both of us.
I think Lewis is a frequenter of the Buck Rising Show YouTube chat, so good to see him.
Lewis is definitely very active in a lot of the community. Love the dude. Shout out to our buddy Bryce Pratt. Had him on the show. Great guy. Love seeing you, Bryce. Al Pierce says, give me 70 musics, please. And I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I like all kinds of music. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't mind seeing a Metallica show at the halftime. You know?
Well, they had a nice run there of the Rolling Stones, The Who, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Bruce Springsteen, the E Street Band. I mean, Prince, maybe not quite that 70s genre, but Prince.
Great show.
I think 2007, for my money, still the greatest halftime show of all time. So I think they had a good stretch run there of going that classic rock direction, and I'm all about it, man. And Tom Petty is basically half my music taste right there. But I like what they've been doing these last few years, just going all out, big shows, big production value, probably playing to the generation that we're living in now in 2022.
Yeah, I'll definitely tip my hat to Jay-Z. They gave him control, and he's really just gone out and shined and put a lot of those big stars out there. So,
no doubt.
Hopefully that continues. And our last comment, Lewis, Cincinnati is 0-3 in the Super Bowl. That is rough.
Yeah, that's tough. And I remember hearing Al Michaels saying at the end of the game, there's Joe Burrow. We'll see him here again. Maybe we will. It'd be, I'm not going to put my money against him, but hey, Dan Marino never made it back. So it's tough when you get there and you can't get it done. You just never know when you're going to get back.
And we'll definitely get into that a little later on the segment. But first, I got a bone to pick, and we'll hit our little screen before we get up there. And it was a great set of playoffs, minus the Tennessee-Cincinnati game. That didn't happen, whatever. I've talked enough about that. Everybody's upset about that. I'm already in the draft, so we won't worry about that. Everything else was fine. But my biggest beef was simply just the Hall of Fame committee. Devin Hester was not put in unanimously as a first pick. That bothers me to my core.
Yeah, that is I don't know. I guess I'd have to do some more background there. As a guy that growing up, Devin Hester, my biggest memory of Devin Hester is when he ran that kickback in the Super Bowl against Peyton Manning and the Colts. And thing is, I was in middle school. I think I was in 6th or 7th grade when that happened. So Hester, a guy who retired probably in the middle of my college years, I don't know that I really got the full Devin Hester experience as an NFL fan at the height of his powers, which was that time with the Bears, right? I mean, I think that Super Bowl was maybe one of his first couple of years in the league. And what I do know is he is arguably the best special teams player in NFL history, the best punt returner, the best kick returner. So multiple All-Pro seasons. Yeah, I mean, that's a guy that certainly has an argument, but I wish I could say I knew more about his career as a whole as far as living it in real time. I don't know that I'd be the best judge of that.
Well, Lucas, I'm glad you brought that up because I'm definitely going to guide us through that and show why he definitely was snubbed this year, giving all the little details. Of course, me getting to watch Devin Hester and see him in his prime and just from unknown, especially if you didn't watch a lot of Miami football, which it was really kind of the tail end of their glory days. Basically, Hester was like one of the last greats that kind of came away from that Miami team. So, going forward, you had a guy that literally came out and just busted out the seams of everything. There's a reason why they changed all these kickoff rules. And it's because of Devin Hester. Devin Hester frustrated special teams coordinators to the point where they were just terrified when he stood out on the field. You could kick away from him. It didn't matter. He'd find a way to get to that ball, and he'd find a way to cut through every bit of the opposing players that he was trying to get away from, and there's nothing they could do. Devin Hester was the difference maker. He was the X factor. And here's just a few of his stats right here. Career-wise as a receiver, it's not bad, but he didn't play a lot of receiver. Mainly it was just for decoy purposes, but when he did play, I mean, that's respectable numbers. 255 receptions, over about 3,300 yards, 16 touchdowns, and about 13 yards an average. That's not bad. But that's not why you look at his career the way it is. You look at him being the kick returner. And it was for the 11,280 return yards, the 20 return touchdowns, and the 14 punt return touchdowns. Every time the man touched the ball, he's gone. There's no argument.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a case there. Obviously, I know he's the NFL record holder, and I believe punt and kickoff return touchdowns. Right, I think both of those marks are certainly enough to make his case. But hey, this is his first. Is this his first year of eligibility? Right, because he only retired in, I guess, 2015, 2016 in that range. So if it's his first year of eligibility, then he'll have a couple more shots to get in.
And it's not even the fact that I don't think he'll get in. He's going to get in. My problem is there's certain transcending stars that come out on the scene, and it's a no-brainer. Brett Favre was a no-brainer. Terrell Owens at one point was a no-brainer, but we all know what happened. Really, that's just one of the situations along the writers and the voters where they decided to hold out on that. But that happens. But in Devin Hester's case, man did everything right. He never caused any off-field, on-the-field issues. Never had any problems with the press, as far as I know, or any of the writers that voted. So it's puzzling to me. I just wish I had just a better answer for why he's not in. But there's certain players you look at, and you watch their highlights, and you watch their work. And the work that Devin Hester put out was just first ballot Hall of Fame worthy to me.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys everybody knows exactly who he is and what his impact was in the league during his career. And I think those guys are few and far between when that sort of spans generations, where if you asked a kid right now, maybe at the 18, 19, early 20s, I think just about everybody would know who Devin Hester is, or at least I think that's the case. I'm 26, and he certainly, I know the impact he had. I just don't think I was really conscious enough in my football knowledge to truly appreciate it in real time as it was happening. But no, otherwise, you make a strong case, and I will be surprised if at some point or another he does not make his way in there.
And I believe he'll get in. And I have no doubt. I mean, a player of his caliber, even all the accolades that he racked up in his career within 10 years is impressive. First team All-Pro, 2 years consecutive in 2010, second team 2011, four-time Pro Bowler, three-time NFL alumni special teamist, NFL 2000s All-Decade team, 2010 All-Decade team. To me, this is almost like leaving an Ed Reed or a Ray Lewis or a Reggie White out. And I know that may seem crazy or just a little stretch, especially for a special teams player. But when you have to change the rules for a certain player because they're so dynamic and because you're trying to give competition at least a fair leg and a fair shake for everybody, that's just saying something. And just Devin Hester, to me, not getting in on the first ballot once again is a crime against the voting committee.
Well, it certainly does tell you the prestige of the Hall of Fame, because year in and year out, we have these debates of all-time greats that don't get in on the first ballot. Kind of shows you how hard it is and the impact that you really have to get in so quickly. But no, you're right. I mean, I don't think we'll ever have another player be able to do what Devin Hester did, whether it's the rule changes that you talk about. You certainly, it feels like that every other time there's a kickoff return for X amount of yards, there's a flag thrown and it's coming back. A lot of teams are kicking away from guys, touchbacks more often than not. So yeah, I don't know that another player will ever have an opportunity even to have the type of impact that Devin Hester did. So yeah, I'm with you, and I'm hoping the next time around we see him in there.
And really, I think just the selling point here, and this is my final point on Devin Hester, and I know I'm on my soapbox, but I'm fired up on this one, and that happens. But the selling point here, when Deion Sanders comes out and says, you're the best player at his position, and my daughter's agreeing with me on this.
I can tell. Yeah.
That argument is all you need.
Yeah, no, hey, that's quite an endorsement there, and that's hard to argue. Yeah.
But Lucas, I mean, I've had my disappointment, but of all the players that had the opportunity to get into the Hall of Fame, what one did you feel kind of got snubbed this year? I mean, there was plenty of guys besides Hester that you felt were very much first ballot contenders.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to pull up a list here because I can't say that I've got one off the top of my head. Now I do know, I remember seeing that Tony Baselli got in, and that is certainly well deserved. But I mean, give me some options here. Let's make this multiple choice. If you could throw some up for me, and I'll see what I got.
All right, I'll throw a big one at you, and that would be DeMarcus Ware.
Sure.
First and foremost.
Yeah, DeMarcus Ware, man. I was born in Nashville but raised in Alabama, so I know that DeMarcus Ware went to Troy, and that guy is by far the most popular, the most legendary player to ever come out of Troy, a Southern Alabama native. And yes, DeMarcus Ware is another guy that kind of spanned generations of football. At his position, to be as dominant as he was, and to be a Super Bowl champ there towards the end, kind of as the cherry on top, certainly that's a great argument. DeMarcus Ware was consistently the best pass rusher in football for basically my entire, childhood, from elementary school through high school, as far as I can remember. I mean, that guy, the run he had, especially with the Cowboys, yes, that is hard to argue right there that DeMarcus Ware did not get in.
And I think I'll give two more, but I'll bring this up since Louis Chesney brought up, and I'll give him credit for it as well. Tory Holt's another name that comes up. Someone that was dominated with the Rams, for multiple years, was one of the key piece receivers on The Greatest Show on Turf. I definitely felt he got slighted there as well.
Yeah, Tory Holt, that's a good name. Long career at the wide receiver position, Super Bowl champ, Greatest Show on Turf. That one of the best teams in NFL history. When I look at these guys, I guess I really look at how many times, because the Pro Bowl is one thing, right? I look at how many times they made All-Pro. That's one thing I really look at. And as I pull it up here, I see he made first team 1 year in 2003, made second team in 2006. So I find that interesting when I take a step back to kind of gauge where were they at the height of their game year in and year out, because that's just all pro voting is in the context of 1 year if you were at the top of your game in that particular season. So Holt only making it one time first team is interesting, but at the same time, you're right that you got to kind of take in longevity. And I think that is a huge key in determining a Hall of Famer. Like, I think Frank Gore is a no-doubter Hall of Famer. He's going to be wearing a gold jacket. I don't know how many times Frank Gore was first team All-Pro at running back. So it's interesting to kind of weigh these things in these debates, but that's a good one for sure.
And I think another one that's going to come up, and I know you're probably a little younger to actually remember him play, but Zach Thomas, definitely a lot of people felt he got slighted. One of the most key consistent players on the Miami Dolphins, and was a first all-team pro 5 different times, and consistently always in the Pro Bowl. But, people just felt he was supposed to be just locked in for that unanimous number 1 pick, but it just didn't happen for him this go.
Yeah, I'll have a tough time having a strong opinion on that one. I think you might be right. I think we've officially surpassed my outreach as far as my age goes.
But I mean, especially he was a part of that New England team in 2007, right along with Junior Seau, opposite the other side of the defensive line. So, really, I feel just another great player that got snubbed, and it's really crazy, especially going forward next year with some of the guys that we're going to be talking about that are going to be up for the Hall of Fame, and I think really along those lines, you really got to consider with all the other players waiting, is there anybody that could really jump around there or could move up? It's a lot to take in, but I mean, I'll save that for the next segment. But Lucas, I guess just to end on this one, do you think there's a way that the Hall of Fame can kind of change the way they do things when it comes to voting wise? I mean, you've got a lot of guys in Devin Hester's case, and then you got a lot of guys that have been waiting for like decades just to get in, just over like little petty stuff. I mean, is there any suggestion you could come up with that could possibly make it a little more fair?
No, that's a good question because we never really look at the processes of these things, right? We just kind of look at the results and who got snubbed and who didn't, and we pay attention to the big surprise reveals to tell, Jimmy Johnson live on Fox that he's gotten into the Hall of Fame. So it's actually a great question, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but I'm not sure. I mean, I know the one thing that I know from, just interacting with and working with players that did this for a long time in the league is how kind of precious that gold jacket is. I mean, just how much it means to guys that played in the league, the prestige of it, that you had to reach a certain level and a certain longevity to even sniff wearing that gold jacket. And I think that's a really special thing. And I like that the NFL Hall of Fame discussions aren't kind of tainted by a few angles, maybe like Major League Baseball is, right? I know that was recent just a few weeks ago that Barry Bonds doesn't get in, the all-time leading home runs leader in Major League Baseball history, and he doesn't get in because of some issues with PEDs throughout his career. I like that we don't have those debates in the NFL, and most of the time it just comes down to how great were they as a player, what was the longevity of their career, and how did they really separate themselves to be in this upper echelon of Hall of Famer. I mean, that just carries so much weight for these guys and for current and former players. So I'm glad it's not up to me because I do not have a good solution. Now, what I will throw at you, though, Mike, is my coworker, Blaine Bishop, is always on top of this, that he believes firmly that Fred Taylor should be in the Hall of Fame, the former running back of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Blaine constantly asserts that Fred Taylor is the best running back he ever went up against in his career with the Titans. So that is one name that maybe I was too young to fully appreciate at the time, but otherwise, I know that's one that a lot of people believe should be in.
And that's a really good point. Fred Taylor was dominant with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was one of those guys consistently on the highlight reels, and he ran people over. He was basically a smaller Jerome Bettis. And I guess that's the best comparison I could really give. The man, sure, when he got his feet moving and he hit you, he hit with authority.
No doubt.
But like you said, I know there's never going to be a simple way to make this better. There's always going to be somebody that feels slighted, and that's just part of the process. And even if they find a way to fix it, there's always going to be somebody slighted.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's always going to be a situation where we could think it'll work if we try and fix it, but I don't know. It's one of those, I guess we could try some different things and see what could go from it, but I just think in the long run, if they have to add more people to the voting process, or even if they allow players to the process, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think, the people that played the game should certainly have a say.
Sure, or at least that played the game in that era. But then the one thing I do appreciate it is that, the Hall of Fame in and of itself doesn't feel tainted, right? Like the prestige that it holds is still kind of remains the same. We can talk about what goes into it, who should have gotten in, who shouldn't have, but I do like that the esteem that we hold the guys that do get in kind of stays the same. That's a special thing.
And hopefully we can continue to keep it that way. The Hall of Fame is not the Hall of Good.
Right, yes.
Well, all right, everybody, we're going to take a quick 30-second break. And when we come back, the MVP voting process situation is something that I think needs to be retooled in a few certain areas. And I've got a suggestion how we can do that to make it a little better and even honor a few from the past. So I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour, and we'll be back in 30 seconds. Tired of not being able to find the Power Hour on YouTube? Getting frustrated? There's got to be a better way. Well, now there is. Hey Alexa, find the Power Hour Tennessee Titans. All right, it's that simple. So sit back, relax, and watch every old episode, and new ones drop every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. And don't forget, subscribe, like, and ring the bell for more content. The Power Hour is on the air, live streaming to you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. I'd like to thank my guest, Lucas PANZICA, for joining us tonight. We've had a lot of fun talking football and just a lot of great facts, and especially just things that can be fixed and made better, especially in a voting process. So, Lucas, thank you once again for joining us on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Well, all right, everybody, we're going to jump in real quick to this next segment. And one thing that I think the NFL also needs to retool, besides, the voting process with the Pro Bowl, but I could sit here and go on for hours and hours, but Lucas probably has things to do, and I don't want to hold him up all night. So we'll try and tackle that another night. But one other thing I do think, and it's always bothered me, is the MVP process. I mean, it's basically become a quarterback reward. And, I mean, let's just call it what it is. If it's going to be called the MVP, you might as well just call it the MVQ. It's certainly always going to be favored to a quarterback, and in the last really 4 or 5 years, it's been awarded to a quarterback. So I figured that some of the major awards needed to be retooled because, honestly, the AP award just doesn't roll off the tongue. There's nothing historic about it except for the AP. I'd like to see some history put into it because I'm a history buff. I'm a student of the game, and I appreciate things like that. So I have a few ideas to kind of revamp some of the MVP awards. And I think the best one to start out with is coach. And I think, the coaching award should be renamed the Shula Award. Don Shula is the all-time winningest coach in the NFL. He's had multiple Super Bowl wins. He is respected by anybody that has ever picked up a football. You learn the name Don Shula. I feel that this would be just a great honor to him, especially now that he has passed and has continued to just hold just the great honor and respect of the Miami Dolphins when they were a winning team. Yes, that was really a thing. Miami was a feared team at one point.
That's right.
So, to me, I feel this would be the best way to honor Don Shula, to name this award after him. He was a great coach, and even if Bill Belichick finds a way to pass him, Don Shula will always be remembered as one of the best top coaches, right along with Landry and even Papa Barrett, trying to bring up into that conversation. So, Lucas, what would be your take on this?
Yeah, I like that idea of naming it after someone. Now, I will say, in light of the last couple of months and everything the NFL has done to honor John Madden, I wouldn't be shocked if they did go that route. If that's the first name that would come up, the Madden Award. I kind of like the ring that would have to it. But no, I like this concept of naming it after a coach. Kind of gives that more vintage, more special feeling of winning the award. So yeah, no, I like the idea, and I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying when it comes to the MVP. That it's kind of become a quarterback award, and you look at the year Cooper Kupp had, arguably the best year for a receiver in NFL history, and then last year, I find it funny that Derrick Henry can win the Offensive Player of the Year award, but doesn't get a single MVP vote. And the MVP, of course, Aaron Rodgers, also an offensive player. So I find that interesting. It's always going to be maybe a little bit of a flawed system, but to be honest with you, as far as the MVP goes, I didn't have any qualms with Mike Vrabel winning Coach of the Year. I think he certainly earned that, despite the way they lost in the postseason, for even getting them to the point that he did as the 1 seed. But I do think the MVP, this was the best year for it to go to a non-quarterback. This was the case. The case was made by Cooper Kupp for it to go to a non-quarterback. And of course, it still went to Aaron Rodgers. With that said, if I had to pick a quarterback to win the MVP award, it's not even Aaron Rodgers. It's Tom Brady to me. Tom Brady, whose numbers were better, who had one of the best statistical years of his career, and doing it at the age of 44 is just pure insanity in my mind. And had to go through injury to Chris Godwin, had to obviously go through the Antonio Brown saga walking off the field after the Jets game. So, I agree with a lot of what you're saying, but you know what? If I got to give the MVP to a quarterback this year, I'm not even giving it to the guy who won it.
And that's a fair assessment, but with the MVP award, where it has been more quarterback driven, I think I've got to take a lesson from Major League Baseball. Now, Major League Baseball does 2 MVPs, one in the NL and one in the AL. And then you have the Cy Young, one in the AL, one in the NL. So, I've come up with this concept to kind of make it a little more simpler. I think you have 3 MVPs, but it's in different categories. So, the best way to do it right now is to start with the defense. And that's easy. We make a defensive MVP and just scrap the Defensive Player of the Year award. And I give you the LT. And that's your defensive MVP. And, of course, probably one of the greatest defensive players ever in my mind that's not Reggie White. I think this exemplifies the honor of that, and Aaron Donald, in my mind, would have definitely won this year. But I'm sure Micah Parsons definitely would have been in the conversation as well. But I still think you take that perception of taking the Player of the Year award and just make a separate MVP for defense and offense.
Yeah, so I kind of like it. I like what you're doing there, kind of retooling it. Certainly the Lawrence Taylor Award, the Reggie White Award, those would both apply in that case. And it was a great year for individual defensive players. Micah Parsons, I'm certain will push for that here in the coming seasons. What a debut he had for the Cowboys this year. But between Aaron Donald, I think is the best defensive player in football. But it is hard to argue with T.J. Watt, what he did in tying the NFL sack record by Michael Strahan with 22.5 sacks.
No question here. I definitely want to see what T.J. Watt will do, especially with the Steelers, if they can continue what they're doing. But also on the offensive side, you have an offensive MVP. Scrap the Offensive Player of the Year. Give him the Jim Brown Award. This right there, Cooper Kupp would basically be your MVP for offense.
I like that. Yeah, the Jim Brown Award, the Tom Brady Award, whatever you want to go with. No, I like the direction you're going in here. It's always an interesting conversation because you look at MVP. What does that really mean, right? Does it mean just the guy with the best numbers, the most touchdowns, or does it mean what it says? Does it mean most valuable players? I think those can be 2 separate conversations a lot of times, and maybe that's why it causes so much debate.
And it's funny you brought up Tom Brady because for my next point, like the Cy Young Award, the quarterback needs to be its own thing. The quarterback touches the ball the most on the field. That's not a running back or a wide receiver. He manages the offense. It's a different position all in itself, and it needs to be treated like the pitcher in baseball. So therefore, I bring to you the Tom Brady Award, or the MVQ, if you want to call it that.
I like it. Hey, you know what? You're on the right track here because at the end of the day, we have these discussions about MVP, but if it means most valuable player, well, there's no question that the quarterback position is the most valuable position, not in football, but in sports. It is the most important position in sports. So I'm with you. Let's just create a separate award for it. Give it to the best quarterback in football. They'll be regarded as the most valuable player in football. And then let's kind of funnel off offense and defense and try to get these other guys that have these big years some love, like Cooper Kupp this season. So you're on the right track here. I think this could quell a lot of debate.
I'm just consistently tired of seeing, many great players having many great seasons just get snubbed.
Right.
It's consistent every year, and it just feels like, Cooper Kupp definitely should, in my mind, should have won the MVP award. I don't think there was any player that had the kind of caliber season that he did that wasn't a quarterback. And every year it's quarterback. So let's just scrap the thing and just try something different.
Yeah, like I said, if there was ever a real case to be made for a non-QB to get the award, I think it would be what Cooper Kupp accomplished this year with the Rams. Still couldn't make it happen.
I'm just saying, NFL, I've given you a system. I don't even want anything from it. Take it, run with it. It's right there. That's all I'm saying.
You got my vote.
Definitely getting Lucas's support. I appreciate that. But I'm just saying, if we got to retool the system, I mean, baseball to me has it right.
Yeah, no, there's certainly baseball has its share of arguments and debates in this whole thing, in this whole discussion. But no, it's I'd be hard pressed to find people that vehemently agree with what you got going on here.
Like I said, just hopefully they pick it up and run with it. I throw it out there. That's all I can do. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick 30-second break, and when we come back, we'll break down all the Super Bowl happenings, what went down, what we liked, what we didn't like, and what's potentially going to be on the horizon for the NFL next season. I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour, and we'll be back in 30 seconds. Power Hours on the air, live streaming to you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch. I'm your host, Michael Bishop, and thank you for joining us on this Monday evening. I appreciate everybody for joining us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you chose to be here with me and Lucas PANZICA talking football tonight. So you made the right choice. And everybody else, shame on you. But I'll forgive you. The show will be up later. You can watch it there. But just know I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. All right, Lucas, what do you say we break down the Super Bowl? You ready to do it?
Do it.
Throwing it on the little screen. And, of course, a really good Super Bowl. I won't call it great, but it was good. Rams definitely hung in there. Cincinnati made it difficult, but, of course, once again, keeping Cooper Kupp in their back pocket was the difference maker here. And, of course, the Rams now owning a Super Bowl in the city of Los Angeles. So, Lucas, with this game, what stood out the most, especially with LA now really just showing that they're an NFL town?
Yeah. What stood out the most, I think, is the fact that the Bengals' kind of deficiencies up front in the end came back to bite them. And we realized how important it is to protect your franchise quarterback. You know, the fact that they even got to where they were with the issues along the offensive line. Joe Burrow was sacked, I saw 19 times throughout the course of the postseason, which is just an astounding number. 6 times in the Super Bowl, 9 times in Nashville in the divisional round. So I think we kind of that's what stands out to me the most is the fact that those deficiencies did end up coming back to bite the Bengals, and that's just too hard. It's too hard to win a championship, to win a Super Bowl with those type of issues up front. And then otherwise, just the way the stars stepped up for LA in the right times. And you know, it kind of almost reminds me of the way the Braves won the World Series, right? They have that big injury to Acuna midseason, and then they go for it. They go for it, and they get Jock Peterson, and they bring in some guys that can make a difference for them. And not only did they hit on all of those moves, but they hit big on all of them. I mean, big. And that's what happened with the Rams. Robert Woods got hurt. They brought in Odell Beckham Jr. Had a depth issue at safety. They bring in Eric Weddle off the street, who had retired from football. He comes in and makes a great impact. He's calling out their plays from the defensive backfield. And of course, that's not even considering what they did to basically mortgage their future on Matthew Stafford and that win now mode. For that to pay off in the way it did really sticks out to me, because I think you're going to see maybe a lot of other teams that feel like they're in a window with one piece missing, one key piece, really maybe go for it the way that the Rams did this year, and it paid off.
And Matthew Stafford, definitely the comeback kid for the Los Angeles Rams. What made him the special key piece that made this team just connect?
Well, I do think part of it was maybe a departure, because I look at the last time the Rams were in the Super Bowl, right, with Jared Goff and that loss to the New England Patriots, I believe in Atlanta a couple of years back. And really that team was really built around the run. Todd Gurley had an excellent year that season, and really a lot of play action. And that kind of, in the end, it came back around on them. They weren't able to be explosive in that game. They were completely shut down by a phenomenal performance by that Patriots defense. But I think it was a willingness to just get a gunslinger in there and a guy that had experience in this league that just never had the pieces around him to have success. That was the biggest thing. They just really went for it. I mean, this is a franchise that doesn't have a first round pick until 2024, right? Not only this year, next season is a first round pick that they gave up to get Matthew Stafford. Was it worth it? Absolutely. It was worth it.
And I admire Stan Kroenke for going out there, the owner of the Los Angeles Rams, just going out there and making those moves to let LA know that he's going to be a player in the city. And that's what Los Angeles wants. They want champions. That's why the Lakers have been successful in previous years. I won't say now, but the Dodgers are always contenders, and LA loves a winner. They go out and they get Lincoln Riley. Los Angeles is just shown that they want to try and take over what Boston has had for the last decade and a half. So do you think that that's sustainable?
Sure. Look, and I'll probably direct more of the praise towards Sean McVay and Les Snead making those moves. Certainly Stan Kroenke oversees all of those things. But, it's interesting. Los Angeles is too big a city to not have an NFL team. You're right. I think it always was whenever they didn't have one. But at the same time, I'm conflicted about it because it's the second biggest market in America. It needs an NFL team. Now it has two. They share the same stadium, which is, probably the most up to date, just the most at this point, the most prestigious stadium in the NFL. And I do feel bad on the other hand, though, for the people of St. Louis who have now kind of seen this franchise ripped away from them and have to almost watch this from afar. That's kind of the brutality of it, right? And even for San Diego, even though the team moves down the road just a couple of hours, it's still got to hurt. So I definitely see both angles of it. I don't know how much the city of LA really to its core appreciates and loves the Rams, but I know the city of St. Louis did. So that's why I always kind of get conflicted about these things.
And definitely like that you brought up St. Louis. That Super Bowl was definitely hurting them, especially all the legal processes and everything that they had to go after. So, my heart goes out to them, but also definitely with San Diego, thinking that they're going to go in and actually shine on a bigger stage, and now they're being outshone by Big Brother, what it appears to be like. So the Chargers have basically become the Jets of the West.
Well, I wouldn't be too soon to dismiss what they're doing with Justin Herbert. I have my thoughts about Brandon Staley and some of the decisions he made late season, that there's no way the LA Chargers should have been left out of the postseason, but they've got some pieces down there, and they've got a franchise quarterback that if they can figure a few things out, the LA Chargers will be a player in the AFC West. Tough division, but there's no question they should be in the race year in and year out, and they should have been this year as well.
And, of course, you have to have key playmakers, especially to win a Super Bowl. Odell Beckham being one of those guys that helped take him over the edge. But Cooper Kupp has just been phenomenal and just had a season just unlike any that we've seen in the NFL. And do you think that he can continue to sustain the success?
Cooper Kupp? Yeah, I do. Because of his... No, not just his physical attributes, but Cooper Kupp is renowned for being a technician type of route runner. And I think that's a word I've heard used to describe him a good bit. And that's not a word that I think should just be handed out to wide receivers. The precision of which he's able to read defenses and then execute running routes, and the relationship he's been able to develop with Matt Stafford in such a short amount of time, I think is going to be a big reason for his longevity. When Cooper Kupp physically maybe starts to decline a little bit, maybe he's not as nimble or as fast down the road in a few years, certainly that decline is going to come, but the mental decline during his playing career, that is not going to happen for a player like Cooper Kupp, which is a reason why I think he's going to be a fixture in this league for a very long time.
But a fixture we're looking at the league right now, if he's going to be around, even for next year. Aaron Donald was definitely a driving force of this defense. And the big question is, especially coming out, that this might be possibly his last year. He may be riding off in the sunset like most players hope and dream to do of. Other than the illustrious career that he's already racked up.
Yeah, I don't know. That it's such a personal decision for a lot of players that it's hard to sit here and say why would he stay, why would he go? Because when you look at why he would stay, well, he's the best defensive player in football. I mean, he just is. 7 All-Pro selections is unbelievable for a player at his age. He's 30 years old, and that's kind of the craziest thing is that he's not even into. I mean, he's barely into his 30s, and he's at the height of his game. And if he were to up and leave at this moment in his career, you almost just have to have a hat tip, right? For a guy that accomplished everything that he wants to accomplish, because there's nothing more for him to accomplish. Defensive Player of the Year multiple times, 7 All-Pro selections, and now he's a Super Bowl champ. And he's talked about it publicly. Kind of that's been the one thing. Now, if they had lost last night, I would have said no question Aaron Donald's coming back, but this certainly changes the perspective on things. And you know what? If he decides to leave on top of his, not only on top of the NFL as a Super Bowl champ, but on top of his game, his position, and as one of the greatest to ever do it, more power to him. I think you're muted there, Mike. Not hearing you.
Sorry about that. But I was saying, basically, it was going to be another situation where you see a player hit his 30s and go out on his prime, just like you saw Barry Sanders and Calvin Johnson. But this time you see a better story ending.
Yes, absolutely. You talk about a storybook ending. It doesn't get much more storybook than that.
But also, you look at the other side, and the defense was the selling point right here. And it was only a matter of time till Joe Burrow just couldn't take any more pressure, and it finally just cost them the ultimate game. And it did. Knowing that they're going to have to find a situation more permanent for their offensive line, they've got a ringer under center, and they know that they've got to keep this guy protected. Otherwise, you're going to have him in an Andrew Luck position.
Yeah, no, I think I heard Dan Orlovsky say that earlier today on ESPN. If the Bengals don't address these issues up front, then they will have the next Andrew Luck situation on their hands with Joe Burrow. And look, here's a guy that they got to be careful with. I mean, he's already suffered one, catastrophic injury. An ACL tear is a catastrophic injury, and he suffered one in his rookie year. Now that's not something that you feel like will build on itself, but just don't. You can't let this thing snowball with Joe Burrow because he's a special player. We've seen that at every level that he has ever been. Joe Burrow just wins. He's a leader. He has that unique ability to connect with every single person on his roster, and in a way that endears him to media and to fan bases and to coaches, and to do it without seemingly any sort of ego, right? So I think he's a special kind of player that we haven't seen in a long time in this league. And the Bengals have a very, very special things on their hands, and they need to go all out to protect it unless they want to have a situation, like you said, like Andrew Luck on their hands in the next few years.
And I agree 100%. I mean, there's just so much talent even surrounded around him that this team is going to have a great chance at possibly having a chance to get back to the Super Bowl, even though a lot's stacked up against them, and we see a lot of things like that. Every year's different. But, of course, I go to the tweet of the night, and it just shows how bad the offensive line was for the Bengals, where they finished with a 14% pass block win rate, which was the worst by any team in any game this season. I don't think I've ever seen just an offensive line perform so putrid in a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they led the league in sacks allowed, and it was the first time ever that the team with the most sacks allowed in football was in the Super Bowl. It's just not sustainable. It's just not. And listen, I do know that there was a grand debate in Cincinnati about a year ago leading up to the 2021 NFL draft about drafting Penei Sewell or Jamar Chase. It was pretty heated up there from what I had heard in Ohio. Well, they made the right decision, right? They chose Jamar Chase. He's the offensive rookie of the year, had a stunning season with his former college quarterback. The connection they had was remarkable right off the bat. That could be one of the best tandems in football for the next 8 to 9 years if the Bengals will let it. Now it's time to protect the quarterback. There is no question that is number 1, 2, and 3 on their biggest needs going into the NFL draft. That defense, even the way it stepped up, Their secondary, which wasn't very good in the regular season, forced a lot of turnovers in the playoffs. Those are all things they need to address, but there is no question protecting their most valuable asset, which is Joe Burrow, has to be priority 1, 2, and 3 going into the draft.
And they're definitely going to have a pick of the litter for some of the offensive linemen that they want to draft. A very, very deep draft for linemen and skill players.
Yeah.
But get into the play of the night, and, it's no shock. Cooper Kupp was basically quiet most of the second half until they finally needed him. And I think that's what impressed me the most, especially that the Rams were basically keeping him in their back pocket. And I know there were a lot of drives that stalled out. But just for whatever reason, I felt that Kupp just wasn't being utilized because I don't think they wanted to just give away their big play. Did it kind of give that sense that they were just kind of holding back like in the San Francisco game, then just let him loose?
Not necessarily. I think maybe they were a little too reliant on the run game early on. They really tried to get that going, and it just wasn't working. But it was almost like something clicked, right? Like, okay, let's throw to our best player here. Let's let our MVP candidate, offensive player of the year, make something happen. And it turned out to be a good decision. I was surprised the Rams weren't a little more aggressive right off the bat.
And one thing they're going to have to be aggressive in is definitely free agency. They're going to have a slew of players up for possibly renegotiations with contracts and a lot of free agent decisions to make. So moving forward, what's some of the key guys they're going to have to try and lock in to possibly make another run at this?
Oh, that's a good question. When you look at the Los Angeles Rams, that depends on so much. I just don't know if that's a question that can be answered right now because you've got Aaron Donald mulling retirement. And if that guy retires, boom, there's a massive hole in the middle of your defensive line. You've got a guy like Sean McVay where there's actually some question marks about what his near future holds. We talked about it at the top of the show, if he would make a good television analyst. I mean, there's been reports that that's something that would intrigue him. Maybe he would step away from the game in similar fashion to Aaron Donald after accomplishing the biggest feat you can as a head coach. Maybe he steps away for a few years, and he's talked a lot about wanting to start a family and spend time with them and putting those things in perspective. So there's so many things that need to be addressed before they even get into free agency, before the Rams even look at pieces they need to add to supplement certain parts of their game. But otherwise, I know safety is going to be a big question mark for them. Eric Weddle, you wouldn't think would be able to come back, especially after he injured his shoulder in the Super Bowl. He gave them what they needed out of him, a gutsy season for a 37-year-old guy that hadn't played football in 2 years and really became a leader of that defensive backfield. But otherwise, I think that there's a few things inside their building they need to address and figure out before they kind of turn their attention to free agency and the draft and see the holes they need to fill to try and repeat.
But I'd also add to that, you would also have to think about what they're going to do with Odell Beckham, especially having a possible ACL tear, knowing that might possibly affect their decisions with him in the long-term run.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. Odell has come out and said he wants to be an LA Ram, that he would take a discounted rate to be an LA Ram. And look, Robert Woods is coming off a really big injury too. But the good news for the Rams is you've got the best receiver in the game on your roster in Cooper Kupp. Van Jefferson, local guy, Middle Tennessee product out of Ravenwood High School, stepped up nicely for them this season as really a tertiary option for most of the season. So there's another guy that can really complement what the Rams are doing on offense. I think they're going to be okay at wide receiver. If they figure out what to do with Robert Woods and Odell Beckham Jr., they're going to have one of the better arsenals in the NFL.
But definitely before we wrap this one up, I think one thing that the Rams need to do is send the Tennessee Titans a gift basket of some sort for at least setting out a blueprint on how to get to Joe Burrow.
Sure, no doubt. Look, the Titans to pick up 9 sacks in a playoff game and not win, that's quite an accomplishment. I don't know how it – still look back and don't know how it happened, still almost in shock about it. But that was why I picked the Rams going in, right? Because the Titans were able to sack Joe Burrow. That was the argument, right, about the Bengals up front. Like, hey, he got sacked 9 times against the Titans. They still came out on top. Okay, well, the Titans also threw 3 interceptions. They shot themselves in the foot over and over and over again on offense. I didn't really think that the Rams would do that. They almost did. 2 interceptions, one of them in the early part of the second half that felt like a backbreaker in the moment. But the Rams defense, the way it held strong, and then they were able to find a groove with Cooper Kupp to make the clutch plays late. ultimately that caught up to the Cincinnati Bengals. But you're right. The Titans showed just how much of a weakness this offensive line can be for Cincinnati, and the Rams ended up winning a Super Bowl in large part because of those 6 sacks.
And it's going to be an interesting offseason, jumping in, seeing what all these teams are going to do long term. So, of course, my daughter's got a lot of say on that. But I think one of the things that's going to make this offseason interesting, I guess you got to put the Rams as a favorite right now, just because, just in the sense of where we don't have any questions for everybody else. I guess the Rams are the best favorite. So I think that's the safe bet right now, but I think once March hits and we start seeing free agency start looming, I think that's definitely going to change a lot of perspectives.
Well, I know early odds have the Chiefs as a favorite right now. The Bills are right up there in that conversation, but you're right. Free agency and then the NFL draft adds so much to these conversations, and it's going to be fascinating to see what the contenders kind of try to do here as the 2022 NFL season starts now, right? It starts in free agency, so it's a quick turnaround.
Everybody's 0-0 today, so
Correct.
Fresh start, catch your breath. Well, all right, everybody. I want to thank Lucas PANZICA for joining us on the show tonight. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us. We've had a great time with you. Love to have you back on anytime you want to talk draft or free agency.
Sure. Enjoyed it, Mike. Appreciate you guys having me.
And I definitely wanted to let you get another shout-out to the guests to let them know where to find you.
Sure. You can hear me every day on 104.5 The Zone from 10 to 3 on the Buck Rising Show and Blaine and Mickey. All of our high school sports coverage, the Ultimate Tennessee podcast on the Zone Network, and it's at Lucas PANZICA on Twitter.
Lucas PANZICA, throwing down all the knowledge and football knowledge you need to get you through the day. Lucas, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, everybody, I want to wish you a good night. Take care. We'll see you next Monday. I'm Michael Bishop with the Power Hour. Take care. Tighten up. Thank you for watching the Power Hour.